So welcome everyone, and thank you so much, Jane, for being with us for this conversation. So you have quite a rich life experience. You've been a homesteader, and you've lived off-grid for several decades, I believe, since the 1970s. You've also you're an ordained minister in the Unitarian Universalist Church, a former nurse, a published author, and you are one of the longest standing moderators on the Deep Adaptation Facebook group, since you've been a moderator on that group for more than 2 years now, 2 years and a half, I think. So thank you so much for being with us today. I think Wendy and I will start off with a few questions and then open the floor for everyone to ask theirs. I'm very curious about how you what has changed for you, or what you've what have you learned possibly as a result of interacting with the Deep Adaptation community. So in particular, do you feel that in your role as a moderator you have become someone new, or you have started doing things that were completely new to you as in this group? And if you'd like to share anything about that.
Well, I can't stand Facebook, just to say that. So yeah, there was a learning curve to learn how to be a moderator. When Sarah Biddle asked me to be a moderator, I was honored and petrified at the same time. So there was a learning curve to being a moderator about technicalities, but otherwise it was, I discovered that was part of who I was. Like, coming into deep adaptation meant I found my people. And that was a big relief, actually. We were off grid, not since the 70s, that would have been nice, since the 86, actually, until 2003. And I've been with solar, but net metering on grid since then, anyway. No, finding deep adaptation was the right thing at the right time.
Thanks.
And just to let you all know, for those of you who may not know me, I am in Vermont on Lake Champlain on the Canadian border. And today, for some reason, a lot of airplanes have been flying low around here, and I don't know what that means. It's some border thing happening, so don't mind me if I get distracted or you hear an airplane. And I just went swimming because it's in the 80s and still and muggy because we just had Tropical Storm Fred yesterday.
Jane, can I ask you a little bit more? And I know that this has happened in a conversation before, but I think it's really rich for other people watching the recording. You spoke a little bit about how you and your partner, who you may want to talk about later as well, traveled a lot, and that you really adore travel. And you've spoken a bit about how Facebook and being in the Deep Adaptation group has given you something, especially now during lockdown. Do you want to talk about that a bit, about traveling and who's in the group?
Traveling on Zoom.
And in Facebook as well, all the people.
Yeah. Well, it coincided quite nicely now, didn't it, with the pandemic, to get locked down with all of you. It's been really great. Yeah, Sky and I retired early in our mid-50s to travel and do volunteer work, and we spent a lot of time in New Orleans after Katrina, helping people rebuild, and did some other things. And then we also spent a lot of time in France on our houseboat. And I still don't speak any French except to say the lock is broken.
But so do you feel that the Facebook group or the Deep Adaptation Forum community has been a kind of, maybe not a replacement, but at least a way for you to travel vicariously through other people's experiences of what's happening around the
Yeah,
world?
especially knowing, meeting people and learning more about people who live not in the US or Canada or Western Europe, because those are all the places I'm familiar with. So it's been very interesting to meet the Australia, New Zealanders, to meet the South African people. There's a handful from Southeast Asia, a few in South America. So it's the Caribbean. It's it's really interesting and enlightening. And recently I was pondering my life, and and if it wasn't for this lockdown, this pandemic thing that doesn't go away, I wanted to travel and actually go meet people where they are, because it's really interesting to me that the people in deep adaptation are from all over the world.
So you've just referred to you and your partner traveling to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina to help rebuild, I think, the city.
Yep.
And I recall you were also on the Greek island of Lesbos at some point, working with Syrian refugees. So I find this really interesting because at the same time, you also have this strong background as a homesteader. So you seem to combine this close attention to global solidarity or helping people who are in need, even when they are far from you, with what we could call hyper-local action and growing your own food and becoming more self-sufficient. So I was curious if you had any thoughts as to how do you think people could articulate those two ways of being in the world going forward, so both now and in the future? Do you see ways to reconcile this kind of local action with global solidarity based in your experience, particularly when travel is difficult?
Right. Doing local stuff is really important, and unfortunately where I live, I have found that a very challenging activity, because everybody thinks of Vermont as Bernie Sanders' liberal bubble, and not all of Vermont is. And I happen to be in one of the very conservative bubbles in Vermont. My neighbors are all Trump supporters, though they don't have the flags that some people do further away in town that say God, guns, and Trump, and fuck Biden, and stuff. And I'm a little uncomfortable with that. So, and I've lived in both liberal and conservative parts of Vermont, and I'm finding it a personal challenge to be in the conservative part, because I feel like I can't make any headway with community building. I've only been living where I'm living for the past couple of years. And at the same time I feel like my, my homesteading self-reliant skills came in really handy, both in New Orleans and on Lesbos, because what I know how to do is to make do with what is at hand. And a lot of the New Orleans work, there was physical work of actually building houses and rebuilding houses and stuff like that, but it was a lot of listening to people's stories, because people were so traumatized by Katrina. And that was for years. I mean, we ended up buying property and building a house and living in New Orleans because we were so engaged with everyone in the culture. And that trauma has not gone away for people. And that was in 2005. And when I was on Lesbos, I was there as part of a medical team that met the Syrian refugees on the shores when they came across from Turkey in flimsy little lifeboats. And I was there in January and February, so it was also winter and cold. And we met people on the beach and mostly dealt with hypothermic people, sopping wet. You know, it was 3 or 5 miles from Turkey, and these were people who had never been in a boat before, never mind driven a boat before. So when they hit land, a lot of the women especially passed out because they were so freaked out and then so happy to hit land and not be dead yet. You know, they came with nothing, you know, not a backpack, not anything. And it was interesting. I mean, this was part of a conversation we were having yesterday. The team I happened to be working with at that time were EMTs mostly. There was a doctor, but there weren't any other nurses. And people passing out to an EMT meant CPR and IVs, and people passing out to a nurse meant I need to sit here and hold this woman's hand and talk softly to her until she comes to and make sure she's dry and warm, you know, basic stuff. So it was really interesting to watch that and also fight with that. It was like, guys, hey, back off. So it was, you know, it was amazing. It was frightening to go there, and it was amazing to go there, and to you know, to both see how people on the island lived, and how they were dealing with this flood of people. I mean, some days there were 500 people. It was about 50 people in one of these boats, and they would just keep rolling through, and maybe they'd have life jackets and maybe they wouldn't, and there'd be little kids and people in wheelchairs. And I mean, it was astounding. And what I learned from that was, what would it take for me to flee home with nothing, to go somewhere else? You know, I can't imagine. And yet they did it.
Thanks. So what I'm hearing is that you, by being there, and you were able to contribute many things due to the wealth of experience you had already as a chaplain, as a nurse. So it became easier for you to distinguish how to engage with those people who are in need based on their needs, right? Where maybe if you hadn't had this kind of background, you might have been all, find it much more difficult.
Oh my God, if I hadn't had the background, well, first of all, I probably wouldn't have gone, but I would have freaked out, I think. You know, after my first experience of that, I would like, hey, maybe this was a bad idea to come here. You know, because it was very overwhelming, because when those boats were coming, that, you know, you had to clear those 50 people off the beach before the next boat got there and got them warm and taken care of. And you know, the group I was with, once we got them off the beach, there were people who got them dry clothes and tea and cookies or something. And then the UN refugee camp people came and picked them up. I mean, this all happened really fast. So it was, you needed to be able to go by the seat of your pants and not freak out.
Jane, are you at the moment looking at any work in that sphere? I heard a rumor about a house that you're doing up.
Oh yeah, I'm given that I don't see travel in the foreseeable future. I am buying an old Victorian in Burlington, which is the largest city in Vermont, that needs to be completely gutted and started over. It was built in 1888, and it's been in the same family all these years. And the last person died in 2014 and it's been abandoned since then. The building inspector promised me that it had good bones and will be okay to renovate. And it's 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. And my intention is to have myself a climate refugee refuge once it's done. But it's going to take like a year or more. And building materials, I mean, you've all probably heard this, with, at least in the US with COVID, building materials have escalated. And I just got some estimates on doors. I have to put in new doors. And they're twice the price of the doors I bought 3 years ago when I built the house I'm in. Twice. So it's going to be tough. But I haven't got anything else to do except moderate deep adaptation and grow vegetables. So
that sounds fascinating. So you're, in actual fact, you're going to start a new, I don't know what it is, a charity or a local association of some sort that will run this.
It's going to be me. I'm not going to make a big deal about it, but it'll be me. I mean, there's already, you know, I started the Northeast US Deep Adaptation Facebook group, and we have a lot of members who don't live in the Northeast but want to move to the Northeast. And so I've already said, okay, this is where you can land and then be able to take the time to, do you want to live in Vermont or New Hampshire or the Adirondacks or whatever, you know, take some time to really decide what you want to do.
Have you noticed whether the recent pandemic has made more people want to engage in local community building around Vermont? Not necessarily in your own neighborhoods, but have you heard of more efforts being started as a result of people maybe moving to Vermont, buying houses, or wanting to have a more resilient community-based lifestyle?
Well, so there's a yes and a no to that. That a whole ton of people decided to move to Vermont with the pandemic. People from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, kind of primarily that area. Houses don't even stay on the market for a week, and there are bidding wars to buy houses. The only reason I got this puppy, it had been on the market for 2 years and nobody wanted to face it. You know, people want to move in. They want to buy something and move in. And, you know, that's not happening where I live, because this is sort of a very old family, conservative, we don't like newcomers kind of area. But the real estate agent that I was dealing with about this house in Burlington, you know, he was like straight out, because people, you know, he can't keep up with it because people just buy houses and buy houses. And I don't know. I have not heard anybody doing any community building. What I've heard is people hiding away, and that maybe they'll settle out after a year or so, once they're done being freaked out and decide to be part of their community. It'll be curious, as I used to live in Burlington, and then I came here with the pandemic. So it'll be curious to go back and see what's happening. And yes, you can all come and live with me.
Thanks, Jane. Wendy, did you want to ask something?
Jane, there's so many wonderful bits of your story that I've heard, and I'm so excited about sharing this more widely, because I think for me, you embody so much of what we talk about in deep adaptation. It's very visible in the way that you live, the choices that you're making now and the choices that you've made in the past. So I think Doreen touched on this, but we had a conversation the other day about inner work and practical deep adaptation. And I did smile, because I think your words, I'm paraphrasing, you were like, I've done a shit ton of inner work and now I'm just doing practical work. But may I ask you, for the purposes of this conscious learning thing, a little bit about some of the inner work that you've done? And I want to invite you perhaps to talk a little bit about the process of your partner, Sky. He went through quite, whatever you want to talk about around that.
Sure. Well, I've always been a person that did inner work, throughout my adult life. And then when I went to seminary, which was in the early 90s, when you hit seminary, you do a lot of inner work because it's really tough. And learning to be a chaplain and being with people and active listening and learning how to take care of yourself so all of that doesn't flood you and paralyze you. And at the same time, I was the parent of small children and the partner of Sky, who, Sky was, he professionally, he was a family mediator. So we used to joke that we had 2 communication specialists in the family, which didn't always mean we didn't fight or anything, but, and he also divorced them and I married them. We had jokes about that too. But then Sky was diagnosed with dementia 5 years ago, this month, actually just about today. And he, maybe because communication was something that he did, he wanted to talk about it. And he wanted to find his people so he could talk about it with them. He read every book he could find on dementia, including he was especially looking for books written by people with dementia, which of course are very few and far between, because generally, maybe by the time people are diagnosed, they can't write. A lot of people with dementia don't want to admit it or talk about it. And Sky was very persistent. He, this became the focus of, prior to that, the focus of our life was all environmental work and adaptation. And so he moved into dementia awareness and dementia, having it not be stigmatized. And I knitted him this thing called a brain hat, which was a gray hat with a lot of pink swirly things on it to look like a brain, and he would wear it. And it was a conversation piece, and people would say, "Oh, I like your hat." And he'd say, "Well, let me tell you why I have it, because I have dementia." And 9 out of 10 people would like, "Oh, okay, bye." But then there would be these people saying, "Oh, my mother has dementia, or my wife has dementia, or whatever," and they would want to talk. And that always made it worth it for him. Then we started a blog. I see Dorian's put the blog in the chat. And then we went on a national speaking tour for a year, doing a sermon and a workshop talking about dementia, until Sky couldn't do that anymore. And then he died last winter, the way he wanted to. Peacefully, no muss, no fuss.
It's a beautiful blog. It really is a beautiful blog. And thank you so much for keeping that going, Jane. I got a lot out of it. My father passed from dementia 2 years ago. So my family found that very helpful as well. So it's interesting. It's your personal process, but that you shared it, I think has helped a lot of other people. It's been a really valuable lesson for me in terms of deep adaptation of what we do. Sometimes we go over and over and over inner work in the Facebook group, and it can be a bit, I know for some people it's like, oh God, not that story again. But for some that come in who haven't had the chance to talk about some of these things, the grief and the loss. Yeah. So, Dorian, we've got a whole list of questions for Jane.
Keep going.
Yeah, there's so many, but I think maybe we could just open the floor, Wendy, if anyone else would like to jump in and ask anything or comment on anything. Sasha?
Well, I really am curious about the experience of being Facebook moderator, and just whatever you'd like to say. And I was interested to hear you also previously didn't like Facebook, so I'm just wondering what the experience has been like for you.
Well, it's been good. And part of what's been good is all the people I've met. And it's just been really interesting to watch the group change and develop. And there's over 13,000 people now, which still blows my mind. And sometimes I and the other moderators get frustrated. Oh, we're going to talk about this again. And somebody brought that up again. But it's hard when you've got 13,000 people and new people are coming in all the time and they have to process, speaking of inner work. And so I'm grateful that Sarah Biddle started the practical deep adaptation group and asked me to do that with her. So that's a nice balance for me to be able to moderate that, because that's more where my heart is, in the practical stuff. But I also feel like my chaplain skills come in handy in the big group when you have to speak to somebody about how they're being rude or not helpful. So it's mostly just watching and waiting and being present and not actually doing. I am the moderator that accepts all the new members. So I didn't used to be busy with it, but I'm getting busier all the time. It's escalated since the IPCC report came out. It was like 5 or 7 new people a day, and now it's closer to 30 or 50. And some people, when they answer the membership questions, just say yes, yes, and other people really pour their hearts out, and it's really interesting to, I feel privileged to be able to read all that. Yes.
It's like another kind of refugee experience, like you experienced in Greece, on Lesbos. It's very similar. It seems like. I have a question. When you move to Burlington, does that mean you're going to give up your place where you are now, or you're going to have 2 places?
Well, it's sort of a long story, but when I knew Sky had dementia, we left our house in New Orleans and bought a duplex with our son and his girlfriend, and the 4 of us renovated it. And the plan was that they were going to help me take care of Sky. That was 2016. And in 2017, Sky's aunt died and left us a little money. And so the family said, hey, we should have a camp on a lake. Let's do that. And so in 2018, myself and Sky and our kids and their sweethearts built this camp, which is where I'm living now. And I sold our half of the duplex back to our son and his girlfriend once Sky died, because there was no reason for me to live there anymore. So I don't know where I'm going to live is the current plan. I'm not abandoning camp because this is 3.5 acres. I put in an orchard. I have small fruits. I have 20 raised beds. I have a beautiful lake out here that I've already been swimming twice today and will be going after this call. So this will be my base, and that the Burlington house will be for the climate refugees, and I can stay there if I feel like it, I think. We'll see. I mean, the renovations are going to take a year, so a lot could happen in a year.
Thank you. That's amazing that you have so much energy and life force that you can continually create these environments and expand on the ones that you've already experienced. Like I say, the business with being a moderator feels very much like that experience you had on Lesbos in a more virtual sense, rather than dealing with human bodies,
Right.
washing up on the shore.
Yeah. And it's a nice, I do like to create, which is why Sky and I built 7 houses and renovated 2, and that I'm going to do it again. And I feel like gardening is creating. I knit, I make quilts. You know, that's what I do. And so actually then it's nice when I want to break to go on Facebook, because then in a way I can relax once I go on Facebook and not do and just be.
Jane, can I just check in with you? So when you deal with all the new people that come onto Facebook, you sometimes interact with them as well. So there's quite a lot of community building that's going on there as well, just in accepting new members, and some of them join other groups that you're part of, and some of them don't answer the questions. So I know you interact with them a little bit on that as well.
Right. Yeah. If people don't answer the questions, I message them. And Facebook being what it is, they may or may not respond to my message. But I would say probably a quarter of the people I contact message me. And sometimes we have like interesting conversations, because the person will say, hey, I'm too freaked out to answer the questions. Like, I don't know, tell me more about this group. You know, do I really want to do that? You know, and then other people were just like, oh, I didn't see it. Sorry, you know, whatever.
If anyone would like to ask anything or comment, please just feel free to unmute and jump in. Fred?
Yeah, thanks, Dorian. Jane, thank you. God, blimey, yeah, you are out of work central, like blimey. So the question, I have a load of questions, but the one I'm going to go for is inner work, quote unquote, because I might even want to unpack what that actually means. Is inner work an absolute essential before even thinking about doing any outer work, or or not?
No, I mean, I started wanting to do the homesteading thing, you know, in 1971, and I had my first garden in 1974, and I bought my pressure canner, which I am still using, in 1974, and then when Sky and I met in 84, and we got together in 85, and we bought, he was living on a commune, and he wanted to homestead as well. So we bought a 45-acre piece of land in northern Vermont, and, you know, did the whole draft horses. He pulled the logs out of the woods, and we sawed them into lumber and built a house, and the babies were born at home, and we homeschooled, and we raised our food. And inner work, there was like, we were too busy. And we would talk about stuff. I mean, we were both fairly enlightened people, but we were also busy surviving, and slaughtering animals and trying to figure out what we were going to eat when all the carrots were rotten, and and the kids were whining. So we did more inner work as we got older. I mean, I did a lot in seminary, which also kind of forced Sky to do that too, because circumstances were that I worked part-time as a hospice nurse and went to seminary full-time, and Sky was a house husband and stayed home with the kids. And that was a big experience for him to, because we had moved to California for me to do this, for him to not have a professional life. He learned what a lot of women feel like when are they enough to stay home with the kids anyway. And then the choosing to retire early, and a lot of it was watching the environmental crisis unfold and get worse and worse and worse. And especially when we were on the boat in France, we had long, in-depth conversations. Was this like wrong? And we were flying across the Atlantic. We were burning diesel fuel. Should we like not do this? We ended up putting in an electric engine and solar panels on the roof of the boat, but that was the very last summer before Sky got diagnosed. So we never actually got to enjoy the boat, the solar panels and the electric engine. So, and then New Orleans was a big, Sky was especially very touched, and he did a lot of inner work around being in New Orleans because I guess I had dealt with my racist upbringing before that, but he had never been around non-white people. And so he really had to deal with his own white supremacy, inner racism stuff when we were in New Orleans. You know, I did too, but it was much bigger for him. So we just kept going. And then, man, when he got dementia, he wanted to talk about everything and work on, you know, what kind of end of life he was going to have. And we did it.
So to flesh out my question a little bit, to drill down a little bit more. So, you know, so I'm thinking about, like, so I'm a nurse too, and I work in mental health. I'm a member of an organization over here called the Climate Psychology Alliance. And we have like an outreach thing where there's like a list of practitioners. And if you're freaked out by all this horribleness, just contact the nearest one to you, or just look at them and get in touch, you know. And so I've been fielding a bunch of that stuff. And I get a mixture of people who are doing masses of outer work and are broken into 1,000 pieces. And they don't know why. They're kind of like, I'm doing, you know, what more am I supposed to do? That's kind of, you know, and I kind of think, okay, kind of put the doing down for a bit and start leaning into the being a little bit. It's like just that piece there about the inner work, you know. And then it's, I don't sleep, I've got overwhelming feelings of dread, my hands can't stop shaking, my heart, I'm palpitating. They use words like eco-anxiety, you know, the diagnosing people are rubbing their hands together furiously, the drug companies are waiting in the wings going, yeah, we've got drugs for that. You know, and it's like, no, this isn't a disease. This is an illness. This is an adaptive response to a real life situation that requires, you know, what we're using the words inner work here. So that's what was behind my question, really, was like folks who are, you know, new to inner work and outer work, being faced with this information while they're living their lives and going, I know, I'll join Extinction Rebellion and I'll glue myself to a bridge and get arrested and everything. And then they're trebly traumatized. So what do you think?
Well, I think, you know, for me, because because Sky and I knew, you know, about this for so long, you know, it was so great to read Jem's paper. It was like, wow, there's somebody else who thinks this, you know. And for us, it was going to be peak oil and overshoot and, you know, the limits to growth and all that stuff. But I think for us, and well, certainly I can speak for myself, that my spirituality is based in the earth. And so the thing that calms me and grounds me and brings me back to myself is being in nature, but particularly gardening and tending, nurturing. You know, even when we were on the boat, I had this little tiny garden, and, you know, the whole bow of the boat was covered with little window boxes where I grew things, because that I would need that to calm myself. So I wonder about people with eco-anxiety who are doers, if there's a way for the doing to help ground them.
That's
as
so
opposed
cool.
to freak them out more.
Yeah. Okay, so make the outer work part of your inner work.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Like when I go out, you know, this evening, which is what I've been doing for the past week, since the tomato hornworms have showed up, and for any of you who are gardeners, they are the most evil of creatures. They're like 4 inches long, and they can devour a tomato plant like overnight. So I go in the evening with my glass of wine and my clippers and I kill them. It's really great. Anyway, I will get the tomatoes.
Yeah. Thanks,
Oh,
Jane. I'll step aside for someone else. Thank you.
Well, speaking of integrating the inner work and the outer work, Jane, I was curious about the place of that grief has had in your life as maybe an instrument of learning. So I think I heard you in another interview or somewhere else mention that from early on you started grieving for the earth, right? Mentioning this spiritual aspect. And then you also worked as a nurse, you worked as a chaplain. So I think lots of your experience has had to do with, has been intertwined with this idea of grief and hearing people share their grief with you. And so I'm curious to know if you feel if you've learned anything from that process, and if you've been able to help others, for example, in the Facebook group, or the Deep Adaptation Facebook group, to deal with their own grief as a result.
Well, I think, everybody moves through grief differently, because losing whatever, whether it's a person or your home or your way of life or whatever, it affects us all differently. And I think that's an important thing for people to know, that there's no like one right way about grief. And there's nothing wrong with grief. Like, that's part of the human condition. Like, if you haven't loved something, you're not going to grieve it. So it's really great that you had that much love. And so, for me, there's a joy in my grief because I cry easily. So hang on, people, it's okay. Because I love the earth so much. I mean, once, like 10 years ago, I had a night when we were in France on a river, actually, where I just lost it. I like completely lost it. And I went out and walked on the towpath and just wept and wept and wept and came across this beautiful big tree, and I held it and wept, and it was really great. It was very cathartic. And I grieve Sky every day. I miss him terribly. We were together for 36 years. But then I know that my grief is joy because we had such a wonderful life together. And so then it's okay. It's one of the things I learned being a chaplain is that people don't, families aren't really good at talking about death or, letting people, the 4-year-old in when grandma's dying, like, they're like, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. And, that was one of the things I loved about both being a hospice nurse and then a hospice chaplain is, the person who was dying was generally fine. It was the family that were the ones that, were freaked out and needed more help. And so, with my kids, they were at the grandparents' deaths, and they were little and bigger. I mean, over the years. But like, when Sky's father died, my daughter was 3.5, and my son was a newborn. And Sky's sisters had babies too. And we were all around the bed. Like, everybody was holding their baby. And Dana, my daughter, she was on the bed with her grandfather. I mean, it was an amazing, wonderful experience. And most people don't do that. And And I think that's part of why people are freaked out about dying and grief, because they haven't had an opportunity to really like talk about that or face it or whatever. It's just part of life. I mean, we're all going to die,
And do
whether
you
it's
think,
collapse or not, you know?
right? And do you think that's part of the reason why people are unable to face the fact that we are very probably headed towards societal collapse and very probably extinction as well? Is that it's along the same lines as being so deeply uncomfortable with death?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We used to joke at hospice that Americans in particular feel that, you know, that death is an option. Like you can get treated or you can like whatever, and you can
Right.
outrun death, you know?
Right.
In our consumeristic society here, like you can buy your way out of death somehow.
Mhm.
Which is like not the way it goes. I mean,
Yes, it's all about accepting the truth.
yeah, and I think
we're in denial of the truth.
Yeah, you know, because people are too busy, you know, buying things and having, you know, important careers and whatever. Like and I think that's one thing that the pandemic has done is made people realize that maybe they could live in a different kind of way.
Mhm.
Jane, I had a question, and I know you're just speaking as an individual, but you have such a opportunity to have a broad view of the kind of people that flowing through the Facebook group, and then maybe how the conversation may change or evolve over time. And I wonder if you just have, I know that Sarah talked about how when she first started the Facebook, there was a certain kind of conversation that isn't happening quite so much anymore. And I wonder if you just might have any general comments about how you've seen the Facebook group grow or learn or change. I'm not sure what words you might use.
I'm not sure it really has. It's more like a wave. Like it keeps being the same old stuff. And there's different players. Like the early on, those first few months, you know, the people who posted a lot, they don't post anymore. Like I don't even know if they're still part of the group or not. Though one person just kind of showed up again and was like, whoa, she used to post all the time and I haven't seen her, you know, for months, but she's still here. She's still watching because she just posted. So I think like any kind of group, you know, there get to be new leaders isn't the right word, but you know, the same 10 people used to post all the time 2 years ago, and now it's a different 10 people posting all the time. You know, I guess is the way to say it. But the conversations don't change. It's the same stuff.
I remember in our last webinar 10 days ago, Jane, you mentioned that these days very few people have to be kicked out of the group. Right. Compared to when the Facebook group actually just started the first few months. So do you have any, what's your sense? Why is this the case? Do you think it has to do with, I don't know, the evolution of collective culture in the group, or do you have any thoughts or feelings about this?
Well, I don't know. I wonder if early on, people were, because there weren't as many people, I think a greater percentage of the members posted. And so therefore there were more opinions, I guess we put it that way. Whereas now, you know, I don't have the statistics, but you know, when there's 500 people and 100 people post on a regular basis. That's different when there's 13,000 people and 100 people post on a regular basis. You know, I even wonder, I mean, sometimes for both practical deep adaptation and Northeast US, one of the membership questions is, are you part of deep adaptation? And a lot of people say, well, I think so, but I'm not sure. Because, you know, it's Facebook. And unless you are actively engaged, you may not even see posts. And I also wonder, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but when I accept new members, you know, not only do they have to answer the questions, but I check everybody's profile just to make sure. Because there have been some people who have answered the questions, yes, 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 which is easy enough to do. And then there's climate denial shit on their, you know, timeline. Or there's racist stuff and Trump stuff and child pornography. Oh God, I hit one and it was all pornography. I'm like, oh my God, you know, so I don't know, you know, I took over this right fairly early in the beginning. So I like to think like, you know, we're keeping out the trolls. And the last guy we had to kick out was a troll and I missed it, but like, you know, whatever. So, you know, for 13,300 people to only have kicked out 19, and some of those, a small handful, probably 4 or 5, were people just wanting to post about some get rich quick scheme. And, you know, we immediately got rid of them. They didn't even want to post about the topic. So probably only a dozen were climate deniers or generally rude people that wouldn't back off, I guess.
Can I add one thing, Jane? I'm so grateful to be in the presence of what I feel as a true Earth Mother. and that's what's going to help. The Earth Mother is what's going to help bring us through this, to live with it, to live and die with it,
Yep.
but not be separate from it.
Yep.
What you do is you are not separate from it. Everything you do, you are part of it. And you don't look at yourself as an outsider. You are within this thing. And it's that center that moves and teaches other people. I mean, I don't want to give you a big head, but that's what the Buddha did. It was the Buddha's presence and being able to express the nature of the truth that helped and gave wisdom and power to other people. So I am almost in tears. The more I listen to you, when you started crying, I almost started crying.
Yeah, that used to happen when I would be preaching a sermon. God, I always cried. And this one lady, older lady, she's like, I hate it because then you make me cry. I'm like, well, good. Then you're feeling something. It's kind of the point. And I've got, you know, I'm happy to have people come live here. I've got room for 5 tiny houses. You want to come in a tiny house or build a tiny house, you can come live with me.
I may do that.
Because my tiny house is here. Sky and I built a tiny house and lived in it for 2 years, and it's parked out in the yard.
Wow.
Wow. I second everything Stephen said. I'm so appreciative, Jane. Something that, Dorian, I don't know if you can get the link, but something to mention, which I'm pretty sure Jane won't mention, is that Jane is a published author, and I think more than one book, but I've read one of them, which is called something to do with frugality. I can't remember the exact name.
Freedom Through Frugality.
And it is seriously practical, and just every page had something useful for me. So I highly recommend. I believe Jane is making it available as a PDF, but perhaps there's a way of
I've run out of books, but I have a PDF. And my second book was How to Run Your Small Church, which is probably not interesting to anyone. And my first book is a childbirth book, actually.
Right.
So And I'm trying to find a publisher because I want to have the Alzheimer's Canyon blog turned into a book. And I'm trying to find a publisher for that at the moment. And I'm working on a bunch of climate essays. But today I'm building a greenhouse and going swimming and killing.
Oh my God, incredible, incredible. Thank you, Jane. Dorian, do you want to talk about the timing?
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. What we're doing in those webinars is the first hour have this conversation, and the invitation for the remaining half hour is for those of us who have time to stay on, to comment or reflect on what we've heard, any new insights that might have emerged for us in the process of this conversation, anything at all that may have emerged for you. So if you need to go, of course, please do so. Yeah, for those of us who have time to stay until past, it would be nice to hear what has happened for you on this call so far.
This is Sandra. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. I do have to drop off now, but thank you for Jane for sharing so much and for doing all that you do. And I've seen you on Facebook moderating, and I always appreciate your straightforward style, no nonsense approach. And thank you to the coordinators of this call as well. So I'm sure I will see you all again. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Well, maybe I can share one thing that is with me at the moment, particularly hearing what you shared with us, Jane, about grief, how denying death and grief seems like denying life and love, right? It feels like denying just any strong emotions or feelings and being in the world. And this feels just like such a vital comment. Yeah, so thank you for speaking to this so beautifully.
I could say something. I echo other people's gratitude and inspiration in hearing about your life and the many ways that you've shared. And I also am interested because there's quite a few connections in my life and yours reflected in mine and my partner's, and it almost makes me wonder if there's like a pathway, maybe particular to the United States or maybe not, of that early back to the land movement, and then the people who stayed engaged in some way or another, like through social justice and your activities with, it sounds like you were a midwife, maybe I knew that before, but a nurse. Anyway, there's a lot of similarities in the people that I see as being leaders and visible in the community that I'm in as well. So I just thought, oh, that's interesting. There may be even a bunch of that kind of person.
Yeah, it's really cute because there's a few of the ex-commune members that have joined Deep Adaptation. But you're in Missouri, right? Because that was a big back to the land.
It is, and that's why I'm here. I joined a commune and then fell in love with a midwife, and then off it went. So.
Right.
And I'm also reflecting on, I'm so interested in this picture that you might have of Deep Adaptation through the Facebook. It seems like you're a person who might have a viewpoint on what our movement, if what is common or not common in our movement. And I think it's so interesting to hear that the same questions get answered again and again in waves, and and I'm sure other people have thought about what could be done with that, but it seems that there might be like a core for classes or particular workshops that would address those issues that just keep, that right now at our point of social development is where people are at when they need that Facebook group.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I hope, you guys, Dorian and Wendy, keep going with this, because I think there is a lot, the stuff about grief, a lot about parenting, money. People are concerned about money. Yeah, there's a lot there.
Definitely.
One other thing, Jane, is that one of the biggest senses of strength that I feel from you is your lack of fear. You don't approach anything with fear, and I was told many years ago that children have only two natural sources of fear. Everything else is learned. The first one is fear of falling, and the second is loud noises. Those are the only two innate fears that human infants and children have. All our other fears are developmental. And it's overcoming, for me, it's overcoming fear that is the most difficult challenge.
Well, I can thank Sky for a lot of that, because his favorite phrase was love over fear. And he helped me a lot. And then one of the hard parts about his dementia is he became very fearful, because he lost his ability to understand what was going on around him. And that brought fear. And also, for those of you who've had babies, if you drop a baby, they will grab, their hands will do this because of the falling thing. It's an automatic baby instinct. Not that you want to drop your baby, but you can pretend to drop your baby.
Don't do this at home, folks. I'm curious if anyone we haven't heard so far would like to share something. Judith, Gwen, Grace, Kat, David, would any of you like to speak up?
I could share something. I haven't been to that many deep adaptation things, maybe 3 or 4. But I don't know. I mean, I don't really know how to say this, but I wish that I had a life like Jane's, but I don't. My life is very different. And it's really hard for me to just sit here and listen without playing that inner tape of self-criticism, which just goes on and on and on. And it makes me want to disengage. And I have been fighting that impulse. I want to disengage. I want to just, I mean, every single thing you said has an echo in my life of failure. Almost everything. I mean, everything you've done, I have either tried to do and failed, or not even tried to do in the first place. And this is a very difficult reality for me to just sit here with, because I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to interact with anybody given this reality. I can't discuss it with anybody, except maybe this group. I'm discussing it here at the moment. But I mean, there's nobody in my life I can have an honest discussion with about existential questions. So because I live in a large house and I sleep in my own room, sometimes I talk to myself at night. I just have conversations with myself in which I try to reason things out. But there's nobody I can talk to, and nobody. I mean, it's bad enough I can't talk to anyone about what's happening in the outside world. I can't talk to anyone about the inside world. So I just wander through my days, either having conversations with myself or not saying anything at all. So when I hear about what I consider to be a highly successful life course, like the one Jane has told us about, it makes me Well, I won't say it makes me want to go off and shoot myself because I'm not a shooter. I mean, metaphorically, it makes me want to go off and shoot myself. And I don't even feel comfortable bringing up this topic because it seems very selfish of me to bring this up. And I don't really know that I should be talking about this at all. It's my own problem and I should maybe just shut up about it. But that's where I'm at. So you wanted to know where I was at, and that's where I'm at. So, you know, I mean, this is not, none of these thoughts or emotions are at all novel to me. I'm used to dealing with them all. And strangely, I mean, I've known in my gut, I've known about the future of humanity since about 1960. I just sensed it when I was a child. And I've always assumed that I wouldn't have a full lifespan. So that part of it doesn't get to me. I don't get all nutty about that. I don't get all nutty and anxious about that. What bothers me is the lack of community and the lack of connection. So I'm just feeling really isolated and lonely. And when I get this way, it makes me feel like disengaging. So that's what I wanted to say. Does that resonate with anybody? Can anybody speak to that?
Yep. Absolutely. And Judith, thank you so much for just kind of grabbing that bull by the horns and pressing unmute and speaking it. I have experienced, I don't experience it anymore. And I have absolutely experienced, I've come to call it eco-envy. So people building the equivalent of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, having gone to 1 million permaculture workshops, you know, people, I don't know, growing their own denim and knitting their own yogurt or something. I don't bloody know. And I'm sitting there driving around in my battered Kia Ceed, polluting the shit out of everything when I know I'm fucked, pardon my French, and just wanting to shoot myself. I'm glad I live in the UK, Judith, because if I had a bloody gun like you guys, I'd have done it already. Just, so I'm really grateful, actually. And what I did was keep coming. So, and what I heard in your speaking was you being like you being, you know, like, I don't know if you're familiar with meditation. Yeah, so that, you know, noticing yourself doing what you're doing. When you spoke, that's what you did. You stopped doing what you're doing and you noticed doing what you were doing. And I was like, yeah, way to go. That's how you beat that sucker. Is talk about it, and you're not it anymore. You're this other person then. You're the real you. Kind of going, you know, I feel like doing this. I've noticed myself feeling like doing this. It's like, yeah, wicked. This is beautiful. That's, you know, I don't know if that's, I know that's what I have to say. And thank you for saying what you said.
Well,
and thank you.
I've noticed over the years that my role in any group that I'm ever in seems to be to speak the whatever other people will not speak. I am the designated speaker of the unspeakable. It's not a very popular role, but I keep being in it. Even when I was at work, I used to do that. And I would say things and people would just roll their eyes and like head for the door. And then later they would say, you're right. But nobody would say the things that I would say. So I guess that must be a valuable role.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it's a gift. It's completely a gift.
And not only that, but I can see terrible things in my environment that other people are in denial about. And at the moment, that doesn't feel like a gift, but I can imagine there are circumstances in which it could be a gift. I don't happen to live in those circumstances, but maybe I will someday. And I can also, one of my great skills is sitting with people who are in some kind of horrible state without trying to get them out of it. But I don't have any way to use that skill right now because I don't see anybody. I'm a psychiatrist and I used to work in a public mental health clinic, and I was known as somebody who you could just say anything to and I wouldn't try to talk you out of it. And I was the only person in the clinic who had that skill. But I don't work there anymore, so.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us, Judith. It sounds to me as if you might want to look into the activities of the Climate Psychology Alliance, perhaps,
Yeah,
that Fred mentioned, right?
I wrote it down.
I saw Gwen unmute. Gwen, did you want to speak to anything?
I also want to thank you, Judith. I have a slightly different version of what you've said. And I have some advantages that it sounds like you don't have, but I hope you can find them in deep adaptation. My husband was 9 years older than myself, and as I think back on well, back to the 60s, that probably with a little more support from me, we might have moved. We talked about moving to a commune. We talked about back to the land. We subscribed to Mother Earth News. And so a lot of it was almost could have, would have, maybe should have. And part of it was, I don't know, I guess I live too much in my head and you know, somehow wanting to teach people, but finding the opportunity, particularly after I retired, to teach people about the terrible wrongs of fracking and those kinds of things, and not really doing the sort of positive outer work that you've done, Jane. And now it's difficult for me to do that. So I have some of those regrets also. And yet it is the case that I live on a small street where I have about as close as you can get when you're living in separate places to a commune. I have friends who were willing to clean out my cat box when I needed help. And I always consider that a mark of a true friend. I no longer have the cat, but friends who've been able to help in all kinds of amazing ways when I've had various health issues. So I recognize that's a problem, but living by myself since my husband died 5 years ago means I also don't on a day-to-day basis have people to talk to because my amazing neighbors have their own lives and have children or, you know, other family and so on. So I really thank you for talking about this, and it's helped me think about, along with what you've said, Jane, sort of think about what can I do now that is outer work as well as inner work. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Gwen. So the floor is still open. We still have 5 minutes to go. If anyone would like to make any more comments on anything you've heard so far, now is the moment. Looks like Wendy is, oh, David.
Hi, thank you for your comments, Judith and everyone. And thank you, Jane, for being here and sharing with us. I remember from some conversation that Sky, as he was nearing death, began to see visitors from elsewhere, the other side or something. He was hallucinating, but you talk about that maybe on your blog in some detail. And I just wonder if you could say if you learned anything by hearing what Sky saw.
He once he started having hallucinations, they were in the natural world. I mean, the good hallucinations, not the bad hallucinations, but the good ones, especially when he was here on the lake. There's a lot of trees, there's a big hayfield, and the trees were all people to him, and he gave them all names. And they didn't just like stay as a tree, they would dance, you know, or sing or whatever. And it was, I just loved listening to him talk about all this. You know, dementia is a strange thing, but so many of his hallucinations were really amazing and positive and joyful and playful. And I'm sorry, like I didn't write all the names down because now I'm here with the trees by myself. One of them was Mr. Green. I remember that. You know, I think, you know, it's like little kids, like they can play pretend and do all kinds of amazing things. And I remember my daughter, when she got to be, I don't know, 12 or whatever, she's like, I can't play pretend anymore. Like something happened that disappeared. And how that's something as we as adults need to learn how to do again, is to play and not be embarrassed by that. You know, I think that's something I learned from Sky. In all the horrible part of it, the amazing part was and he'd get so mad that we couldn't see what he could see. Like, there's a party out there, there's a band. It's like, well, no. Anyway.
Really,
you know, beautiful. I just want to say that I can't talk to anybody about this stuff. I mean, finding deep adaptation rescued my life because the only person I could talk to about this was Sky. And, you know, 2.5 years ago, he was far enough into his dementia and fearful, and he didn't want to ever talk about it. He didn't want to know about the news. He didn't want to talk about anything bad. And deep adaptation rescued me completely. You know, I mean, I can talk to my kids about it, but you know, it's like, oh, Ma's talking about the apocalypse again. And my daughter's one of those climate activists that chains herself to things and gets arrested. So it's like, whatever.
And we need those too.
Right.
And dreamers, people who know how to play pretend and then share their dreams with others.
And writers and communicators. I think Jane's done such a service to us for sharing the blog about Alzheimer's and your books. Really valuable.
Absolutely. So we're reaching.
I just want to say, I feel really grateful, Jane, to have heard more about your life and more about who you are, and just see you interact. It's really been a pleasure. So thank you for being here and sharing yourself.
Well, thanks to all of you for actually coming.
Thank you so much, Jane. Yeah, I completely echo what Sasha just said. Thank you so much for being so generous and present and amazing. Thank you for your service, for everything you're doing. So, is there anything else that needs to be said before we close the circle? Go for it, Steve.
I think in some way or other, just that we've survived. We're all warriors. And I think we have to take on that role, not in fighting sense, but in the sense of being present with the most difficult, amazingly excruciating experiences, not running from it. And I think what Fred said to Judith about being your own witness is immensely healing. I thank you, Fred, for that, because that's so important in my life as well. So, you know, I thought the meeting with Sarah last week was a 10 plus that I listened to on the recording. This is off the scale. Today is off the scale. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all for being here and listening. I gotta go. Maybe see you at the next one.
I look forward to seeing you, Judith.
Come back, Judith. Keep
Yeah,
coming.
keep coming back.
Keep coming.
All right, I'll see you all. See you
Yeah,
all
take
in August
care.
or September. Bye-bye.
Next one's Jim.
You're
Should be good.
smiling.
All right. Take care, everyone. And
Thanks again, Dorian and Wendy. Thanks, everyone. Big love.
Yeah, thanks, Dorian and Wendy. These are really lovely.
Yeah.
Thank
so much for
you.
joining
Thanks,
us.
Jane. And thank you all for being
Beautiful,
here. and asking
beautiful,
questions.
wonderful, wonderful. Blessings.
All right. Bye for now.
Did Grace say hello? I don't remember hearing from Grace.
I don't remember either. Grace, can you hear us? Perhaps some connection issues.
Being eaten by mosquitoes.
Oh, they found their way inside your home.
I'm always quite careful about keeping water outside. You know, I've got those buckets with water in by the front of the house, and they are full of mosquito larvae. So I poured them out today, but a little bit late. I think quite a few have made their way inside, but they don't live for long. I think they're like one-day wonders, but there's enough of them to drive me nuts at the moment.
Invite more spiders into your kitchen.
Oh, yeah. Create a big ecosystem. You're still recording, Dorian. Do you want to do that?